I was born February 18th, 1924.
Tell me about, growing up in Coney Island. Was that fun?
We had a lot of friends down there. No money, but friends. And we got along very well. I got a job as a barker on Surf Avenue with the sideshows, the sword swallowers, the things that you don't see them today. They did call them in those days, and I shouldn't use the language. They call them freak shows. And I was a barker for 2 Georgia Peaches, and used to, with a big stick, bring the audience on Surf Avenue and listen to me. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, step up. It's only 10 cents to see the 2 Georgia Peaches. And that's what they paid me, I think, about 10 cents an hour. But this was during high school. But I also played the trumpet. I started playing at about age 12. They needed a second trumpet player. I think it was Jerry Jerome, who played at the Astor Hotel, which I think was located above the Paramount Theater. And I played for a while there, making a couple of bucks, until, I guess, the war started. The announcer on the radio said, "We have to interrupt this program, this broadcast, to bring you news." And that was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. It just didn't penetrate. Where was Pearl Harbor? Didn't know anything about it. And finally, I had to wait until I was, I think my parents may have signed a waiver, but I'm not sure. But I think I was about 18 when I enlisted in the Army Air Corps. I went to Grand Central Station for a preliminary test, and before you know it, my civilian clothes were gone, and I was in uniform. They even gave me a wristwatch. I remember that too. I was, I think, 20 years old or 21 years old. They needed more flying personnel, and they sent me to pilot training school. On one of our flights with the flight instructor, he told me to stall a plane, and when I stalled it, it just dropped, and he almost dropped out of the plane and had a flying fit and almost threw me out of the plane and said, "Buddy, you want to become a pilot? Forget it. As long as I'm your flight instructor, I'm marking you off. Go back, and you're going to go to Germany with the Battle of the Bulge." And he started to threaten me. I went back to the Congress Hotel. I said, "Are there any other openings?" They said, "Yes. Want to become a navigator or a bombardier?" I didn't know what the heck the job entailed. I said, "Bombardier." And that's when they sent me to bombardier school in Midland, Texas. Before that, I went to gunnery school in Laredo, Texas. And in gunnery school, we partnered up. The 2 of us, there were always 2 cadets at each station shooting caliber 50 machine guns and all sorts of weapons. My partner, when I think back about it, it's so crazy. My partner turned out to be a movie star whose name was Clark Gable, and he was a major, and I was a lowly cadet, but he was my partner. They sent me to a crew that was training for the 8th Air Force in England to fly B-17s called Flying Fortress. 4-engine, beautiful, beautiful plane. And we had a good crew, and we flew all over, ready to go to England, when word came down that there was a new plane coming out, called not the Flying Fortress, but the Super Fortress, which was a larger plane than the B-17. It was called the B-29. And they took some crews from England and shipped them back. We almost went overseas, went back to the States for practice, and they sent me to a place in Nebraska called Harvard. It was right near Omaha, Nebraska. And that's where I took my B-29 training. We were ready to ship to California to go overseas when they recalled somebody on my crew, and the flight was aborted, and so we didn't fly that morning. The plane that took off in our place crashed and everyone was killed. So it was like an omen. And I said, what the hell am I getting into? And we shipped out with our new B-29 crew. Let's see, there were 10 of us. Our first stop, I think, was Oahu. After that, we flew across the Pacific to Kwajalein, and from Kwajalein to another island, and ended up on an island called Guam.
Do you remember what went through your mind the first time that you actually dropped bombs out of your plane?
It was all mechanical. We were trained to do certain things, so without thinking, you did them. But when the bomb bay doors didn't close, then you were in trouble, and that happened a few times. We had 500-pound bombs sitting there in the bomb bay. It was my job. I used to climb through the tunnel. The B-29 had a long tunnel, but I used to climb through the tunnel. I used to check the cotter pins, check the bombs and everything, but many times the bomb bay doors did not close. And we had other things to worry about. The runways had to be about 7,000 feet long to accommodate the landing of the 29. It's a big, big plane, a beautiful plane. And the Seabees were still working, putting gravel and fixing these runways. We landed on one runway while the Seabees were making another runway in Guam. Guam was the last island to accommodate B-29s. We were in the 315th Bomb Wing, 501 Bomb Group. And we flew at altitude sometimes of maybe 27, 30,000 feet, sometimes in formation, sometimes not in formation, to our targets. Our targets generally were on 3 islands of the Japanese Empire. The targets on the islands were Honshu, Kyushu, and Hokkaido. Hokkaido was the northernmost Japanese island, but they had a lot of these oil refineries, and that was our main target for the 315th Bomb Wing, to knock out those oil refineries, because Japan depended on oil. Without oil, they were finished. And so we used to fly high altitude. Sometimes our flights in the air were easily 16 hours in the air. And of course we were hit a few times, but that to me that was normal. It didn't mean anything. But the big hit came later on. It came out that General Curtis LeMay came to the island to take over the 20th Air Force. He said, you're not flying at 27,000 feet anymore. You're flying at 7,000 feet. So what they did was paint the under part of the fuselage of the 29s black. They stripped the guns off the plane except for the tail, no waist guns, just the tail gunner. So that was our crew of about 10 men. On one mission, I remember very clearly, we were hit very badly. Our number 3 engine burst into flames. The propeller spun off and hit part of the plane, but just disappeared. And the command pilot feathered that number 3 engine, and then another engine went. Now we're flying on 2 engines. And we dropped our bombs, not knowing as we left, and a plane below us blew up. All I could see was fire all over. They were gone. The plane to the right was hit by some Zeros, I guess, or there was a lot of anti-aircraft firepower from the ground. For about 150 miles before the target, it was so bright from the anti-aircraft guns and lights, it blinded you. After we were hit, another engine went, and the pilot feathered that engine, and the plane started to shake. I lost my seat in the bombardier seat. Our co-pilot, I think, was hit, but I'm not sure. But he fell out of his seat. And the command pilot called me, he says, "Come on." And I crept up to the co-pilot seat and tried to help the command pilot. We aimed towards Ewell because otherwise we were going to ditch. And if you ditch in the Pacific, that's the end. And as we approached Iwo Jima, we had a crash land there, and we came in bumpy. And I was up, and I remember holding some of the controls because I was not a pilot, but the command pilot next to me told me what to do. And with his help, we crash landed at Iwo, and the plane was gone. It was all shot up. There was a vicious fight on Iwo Jima. That crash landing happened during the Battle of Iwo, and we stayed there. Finally got back to Guam with our crew intact, and they strapped. I think I broke a couple of ribs when that plane was hit. Some months later, they called me in, and I was given the Distinguished Flying Cross medal for that crash landing on Iwo. I remember coming in, the bomb bay doors were still open, and with a few bombs in there, that's lunacy. I released the remaining bombs into the Pacific and closed the doors. And it's like something that it was like a nightmare. I absolutely refused to fly for, I think, about 15 years afterwards. I was so afraid of things that could happen that a passenger, a normal thinking passenger, would even think of. Your mind just goes crazy, and all these things come back to me, and it's like a nightmare, and I don't like to think about it.
I would like to thank you for your service.
Well, to reciprocate, I want to thank you all for coming here, because it did my mind good just to think about these things, even though some of it was nightmarish. Probably a lot of other stories I could tell you that might be funny, and some not funny. I lost a lot of friends, especially when I saw some planes get hit and engulfed with flames. and falling down into the water. I feel like crying when I think of that.
I do too.
But all in all, I should not complain, even with my impairments. With Molly at my side, life has been good.